Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry at the Movies with your host Jerry Saravia. So today I'm going to discuss a topic that I have basically discussed and spoken about for many years, 20 plus years now. And that would be how movie violence inspires others to commit acts of violence in real life. Now this is a bone of contention for many. Every once in a while the subject is brought up, mostly in political circles, sometimes by other people, talk show hosts, on The View, anything really, where there's news involved. And this becomes some sort of a, there are diverse opinions on it, perhaps, but for me there's only one way of looking at it. Let's just say that I think that movie violence doesn't inspire others to commit acts of violence. So if you see a violent movie, you really don't feel like going out there and copycatting what it is that you actually see, because we would want to assume anyway that most people that go to the movies are aware that movie violence and real life violence are two separate things and never shall the twain meet. Now, there have been all kinds of cases revolving around this for the longest time. At one point, leaving aside movies for just a second, comic books like Superman inspired kids to do things that they shouldn't have done. For example, back in the day, I would assume in the early 1940s, if I had remembered reading this correctly, and I've heard about this story for a long time, there was a Superman comic book, which one kid read, and then I don't know if he put on a cape, but he thought he could fly, and he jumped off the roof of let's say it was a building more than 3 stories high, and died, because he thought, well, I can fly too, you know. So there's that. There's also, for example, Clockwork Orange, that was shown in Great Britain back in 1971, just as it was in the United States. And the film itself allegedly induced copycat crimes. I shouldn't say alleged, it did. There were young people who imitated the crimes perpetrated by the main character, Alex, dressing up as droogs, and raping women, and in some cases killing them. This is one of the more notorious cases to a certain extent, because Stanley Kubrick, the director, decided to withdraw the film from being shown in theaters in Great Britain. Something that, as far as I know, no film director has ever done since or before Stanley Kubrick. There was also a case involving Halloween 2, of all things, a 1981 sequel, not the Rob Zombie one, where someone imitated the crimes Michael Myers performed in that movie and ended up killing someone. There's so many. For example, back in 1994, there was Natural Born Killers, were a few crimes inspired by that movie, including a couple on the lam, and I think also 2 men who went on some sort of road trip and started killing people. John Grisham's uncle, if I'm not mistaken, was killed by a couple of young teenagers who saw the movie and were watching the movie while on hallucinogens. And anyway, there was another one about Interview with a Vampire, believe it or not, also from 1994, where this guy killed his girlfriend and drank her blood because, you know, he saw Interview with a Vampire. I mean, who doesn't want to do that? The point is that, yes, okay, so there are crimes that have been induced by what they had seen, these people, these perpetrators, what they had seen in a movie. They try to imitate it, to mimic what they see. So there's no question about that, but it doesn't mean that it is the movie's fault. It means that the pathology already existed, meaning that this guy may have eventually killed his girlfriend for any reason. You know, you can blame anything if that's the case. And you have to be able to blame yourself. They don't want to blame themselves. They say, it's the movie that made me do it. It's the book that made me do it. It's the play that made me do it. It's my cat that made me do it. My dog made me do it. Son of Sam. At least I think he denied it since then, apparently, because it was really a Satanist group that induced him to commit these acts of murder back in the 1970s in New York City. But apparently, he said his dog, who was the devil, made him want to do these crimes. So you can blame anything. That's an easy defense, particularly in a court of law if you're caught. You just say, well, the movie made me do it. The book made me do it. He told me to do it. She told me to do it. They told me to do it. The government told me to do it. The pen told me to do it. The CD told me to do it. CDs in particular, music. You know, heavy metal music was certainly under fire back in the 1980s, where certain kids would think they have to kill themselves because of some lyrics that they heard. Um, but all I'm saying is the pathology already exists. So the guy that decided to kill his girlfriend and drink her blood because he saw Interview with a Vampire, that was really just, that was the excuse, that was the trigger. He probably would have killed his girlfriend anyway. Um, so the pathology has to exist already. Because I've seen a lot of violent movies. I don't feel like going out there and killing people. Never. Not after I saw Natural Born Killers, A Clockwork Orange. And why not blame films too that are not, that don't really deal just with violence in our society? What about movies like Bad Boys with Will Smith, Transformers? What about all these action movies where there's no sting, most of them anyway, to the violence that is shown in the movie, that is so cartoonish? So nobody blames that stuff. And I can say I never felt the need to kill anybody based on any movie I saw. I never felt the need to maim someone or to rape someone, or after seeing Saving Private Ryan, I don't think about going out to Germany and start killing Germans. And how many World War II movies have there been, for goodness sakes? Plenty, with a lot of violence. Many World War II movies. Many. Very few, if any, have ever been used as a trigger or scapegoat for someone's crimes, have they? So the point is that somebody once told me, a friend of mine back in New Mexico when I used to live there, and this had been a hot debate even then, because there were a lot of violent movies, which there are almost every year anyway. And he said something which I thought made a lot of sense. He said, well, if you watch a movie about a nice person who commits acts of kindness, who is nice to others, now that might inspire somebody to be nicer. Right? I wouldn't doubt it. But basically, if you watch a movie about a person who is nice and is nice to others and is very kind, will that behavior be mimicked by someone else because they saw it in a movie? 9 times out of 10, no. Sadly, no. Unless, of course, they already are nice and kind. And, of course, those are values in which we would celebrate. But there are movies, too, that, you know, I would like to think movies are a little more complicated than that. And if you show violence, let's face it, movies have had a very short lifespan, when you really think about it. They're just a little bit over a century old. And there's been a lot of violence prior to 1895 when movies first started, hasn't there? Food for thought. This is Jerry to Movies with your host, Jerry Saravia, signing off.